Well, the Nationals are meeting at the moment to discuss their support for a target of net zero emissions by 2050. And before the meeting, National leader Barnaby Joyce had some choice words for those expecting the Nats to fall into line. He said, quote, "We are not in the Liberal Party room, we are the Nationals. We will not be held hostage to what other people think." And he also said it was highly unlikely the party would support increasing the 2030 target to reduce emissions by 28% of 2005 levels. Alex, this is what Finance Minister Simon Birmingham had to say this morning about whether the Nationals were a roadblock for setting a net zero target.
The government is deciding the government's climate change policy. The government comprises all of our members, Liberal members, National Party members, LNP, CLP, etc. So we bring together people right across the country to be able to effectively consider all of the implications and issues.
Firstly, Alex, what is your take on net zero, and is there trouble in paradise?
Well, no, look, I don't think there's trouble in paradise, Caleb. My view on net zero is that it's a folly. It's an absolute folly. It is nothing more than a catch cry and a slogan for the ruling class, political elites. Here in Australia, we can't lose track of the fact that we make up nothing but 1% of the world's emissions. China, as an example, it does in 16 days what we do in emissions in a year. Now, look, the reality here is there is no way, and we've seen much commentary on this in the last few days, but there is no way to achieve net zero without costing us jobs, without winding back our economy. It is very, very difficult. So, look, from a personal point of view, I certainly don't have any appetite for net zero. We have to remember we've got the lowest emissions, or we've got lower emissions than we had in 1990 in this country. We are going to absolutely smash our Paris target. And to extend and go beyond that, in my view, is a very, very dangerous matter.
Well, Matt, I mean, apart from the fact that Simon Birmingham says it doesn't exist, it would seem that there is some level of division between the Nats and the Libs over this. How are you going to capitalise on it?
Well, at the moment, Caleb, the government's a basket case when it comes to developing a policy on renewable energy and net zero by 2050. Labor's had this policy for a long time, and we want the government to adopt it because it's a sensible approach to ensuring that we can reduce our carbon emissions and boost renewable energy and create jobs at the same time. This government's been in office for 8 years, and they still don't have a policy when it comes to renewable energy and emissions reductions. You know, they built the Sydney Harbour Bridge in a quicker time than this government could come up with an energy reduction policy. The Australian people have had enough. They want that climate change is happening. Alex talks about the cost. Well, what about the cost of not acting? What about the farmers who had to endure horrible droughts? The bushfires that we had to put up with a couple of years ago? The Murray-Darling Basin and the agricultural sector that can't get water anymore? That's the cost of climate change that we're paying at the moment. And the coalition and people like Alex want to conveniently ignore that. The Australian people want action, and it's time for the government to wake up to that and get a policy and go to Glasgow and say that we're on board and we're going to do our bit.
Well, Caleb, I've just got to respond to that. We do have an emissions policy. It's working well. And the reality is, if Matt thinks that droughts are being caused by Australia's 1% of the emissions, then he's off with the Pixies, I'm afraid. I've got to say it.
Look, I don't think you're totally lonely in the party, Alex, but it might be a small party. What were you going to say, Matt?
Well, there's plenty of evidence that climate change is having a dramatic effect on longer droughts, on bushfire seasons, on cyclones in the north that people are paying for through their insurance policies. There's plenty of international evidence that climate change is harming the international environment as well. We can't stick our head in the sand and say that everything's hunky-dory and it's okay and we'll just be able to cruise along and not do our bit. And the approach that Alex is taking, I mean, if you took that similar approach to, say, water restrictions, when we're in a drought, we all accept that water restrictions are necessary. And the average household might say, well, I'm only one in millions of households. I can get away with ignoring the water restrictions and hose my garden or hose my lawn or my car whenever I want. If you adopt that approach, then of course we don't get anywhere. Everyone has to play their bit.